Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fort Myers Beach Management and Planning session. We're here courtesy of Diamond Head Beach Resort, and it is Thursday, November 9th at 9 a.m. I'll let the record show that the town manager, the town attorney, Councilor King, Councilor Veach, Councilor Woodson, and Vice Mayor Adderhold are in attendance. The mayor reached out to me this morning. He is under the weather and didn't want to pass that along to any of his colleagues or constituents, and so we wish him well, and we'll give him an excused absence this morning. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, which I believe there is on the video screen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if I could begin by asking unanimous consent of my colleagues to proceed out of order for a moment. We have a special guest here this morning. John Dolmer from the Jacobs Group is with us this morning. He's going to be our liaison from the company to Fort Myers Beach. And I want Frankie to either introduce him, or we'll just have John come up and introduce himself. And we'll explain a little bit about John's role and how he'll fit into the equation here on Fort Myers Beach. Do you want to start, or do you want to have John just come up?
I think John can introduce himself.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Like you said, I'm John Dolmer with Jacobs Engineering. We have been having discussions with the town regarding building department services and providing those services. We have started on bringing inspectors in on a temporary basis just to kind of get inspections going and things moving. We are currently trying to staff up that department so that way we can bring in the full building official and building inspectors, plan review, permit techs, everything that would come along with plan review and inspections. As for myself, I've been the community development director for Bonita Springs for probably about 14 years or so, and have been in the area for over 20. So I'm relatively familiar, but every community has its own unique characteristics, and we look forward to addressing those. So I don't know if there's any questions or
John, if I could,
Yes,
first of all, welcome. We're very thankful to have you and your team help us. Explain a little bit, when you say you're the community development director for Bonita Springs, is that because they've in essence contracted that out, that whole position and that whole role out? And explain how that relationship works in Bonita Springs.
Yes, sir. So that contracted entire department has been assumed by Jacobs. That includes long-range planning, zoning, engineering, building, all of those services that we provide. And that was contracted out in 2008. So we've held that contract since that time, and I've been there since the very beginning.
And Jacobs does all of that work for Bonita Springs then?
Yes, sir. And there are also a handful of other communities, most of them around the Atlanta area, a few in the Denver, Colorado area, and we also provide consulting and operations and management services for the Florida Turnpike. So.
Very good. And so, John, obviously for Fort Myers Beach, you're not taking over that entire role. You're just sort of infusing some additional resources into our town. Is that a fair characterization?
That is correct. I'm not going to be assigned to Fort Myers Beach as a full-time employee. What will happen is you will have your full-time staff that is here. That will be Jacobs employees, and they will report to me through the chain of command.
Very good.
But you will have your full-time staff here. Yes, sir.
And Frankie, do you want to comment a little bit about how that'll work structurally within Fort Myers Beach and who people should look to here on the island if they have a concern?
Yeah. Above all, if anyone that's listening today,
Pull that mic towards you. Yep.
If anyone here that's listening today has any concerns, we always ask that you reach out to me first. That is the way we would prefer to handle it in-house. We don't want to overburden Jacobs when they come on board. There's a lot of things that we have staff in-house, our current staff, that's well-versed in our unique situation here at the beach. And so some of those things we can handle with just a few people. If not, I know I have a great resource in John that I can lean on to, and also with our town engineer still on staff as a certified building official.
So just for the record, you will remain the Director of Community Development then?
For the interim, yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. Sir. Anything else you want to add, Andy? Or okay, John, anything else you wanted to add? Any questions for John? Well, again, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you
anything else? Yep. The first item on our agenda this morning is a presentation by the Urban Land Institute, ULI. And Andy, would you like to introduce our guest this morning?
I will, yes. First, talk a little bit about ULI, and they can too, but we're bringing up Jackie Davis, Executive Director, and Lauren Callahan, Senior Director, Advisory Services. This organization was established in 1936, so they've been around a while, so they kind of get and understand what they're doing. But I'll just turn it over to them and let them.
But before you turn it over, do you want to explain why they're here this morning? What's our purpose this morning?
Well, this was a request of the council to bring this group in. We're trying to come up with some plans for the downtown area, the Old San Carlos, and even go further if we have to. It kind of ties into the group fiber we had, I believe, last month come in. So we are continuing with that series to just gain exposure to the council so they can make some decisions and direct us on which way to go.
Very good. Thank you very much. Welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jackie Davis. I'm the Executive Director for ULI Southwest Florida. And also with me today is my colleague from the ULI National Advisory Services team, Lauren Callahan. So we've had some virtual meetings with the mayor and town manager regarding hosting an advisory services panel to assist the town with recovery efforts as it relates to Hurricane Ian. And before I turn things over to Lauren to really dive into what an advisory services panel is and what that would look like, I wanted to share a little bit more about what ULI is so you guys are familiar, and then also who we are as the local district council. So ULI is a global nonprofit research and education organization. We aim to help our members and their partners build equitable, sustainable, and resilient communities. We were founded in 1936. We have 48,000 members worldwide. We're represented in 83 plus countries. We have 90 plus local offices around the world, and we hold over 2,000 global events annually. ULI is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we have 3 mission priorities: to connect industry leaders, inspire best practices for equitable and sustainable land use, and lead in anticipating and addressing challenges facing the urban landscape. What makes ULI unique is our membership. We are the largest independent global network of cross-disciplinary real estate and land use experts dedicated to one mission: shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact worldwide. Sometimes referred to as a think tank, ULI brings together a unique hybrid of research, education, thought leadership, and hands-on experience. Our scope of membership is connecting public organizations with private enterprises, senior leaders with our emerging leaders, and real estate visionaries with communities around the world. Our culture embraces open exchange of ideas, information, and experiences, which in turn inspires bigger, broader thinking. ULI is a hub of collective lived experience accumulated over the past 8+ decades, which allows for us to lead in creating opportunities for innovative, operational, and sustainable solutions. ULI is its members. So on this slide, you can see all the different sectors that are brought together through the Urban Land Institute. So who is ULI Southwest Florida? We're a group of about 165 members. We range from Charlotte, Glades, Lee, Hendry, and Collier counties. We focus on educational programming, networking opportunities, behind-the-scene tours. We promote the advancement of women as leaders in the real estate industry, as well as provide that bridge for our emerging leaders to step into the real estate community. So I'm just going to quickly go through a couple of our most recent engagements so you can put some member faces. So this is our ULI Executive Committee, or also known as our leadership team. They're in charge of all things ULI, from finances to membership recruitment to putting together our annual programs. One thing that I always tell everyone is so special about my job is I get the opportunity to work with such intelligent individuals who are volunteering their time to make our communities a better place. So it's really special. This was a program we did earlier this year, highlighting all the work of the Bayshore Gateway Triangle CRA, our signature Collier County program held at the Naples Botanical Garden. This is our signature view from the top dinner that we do each year, now in its 10th anniversary year, bringing together 4 female leaders in the industry to really share their experiences and how they got to where they are today, and allows our members to really get inspired and learn from them. Probably one of the best events we do every year. This was our Hurricane Ian Recovery and Response Panel we did shortly after the hurricane. We wanted to provide a space for our members to get together and really share, what they were going through, their struggles, and talk about opportunities and how we can all work together to rebuild and grow after the hurricane. This is our annual Emerging Trends program that we do each year. ULI produces a report in conjunction with PwC that really outlines all the emerging real estate trends for the year, so it gives our members that insight knowledge, and then we also include a local spin on trends that are happening in the Southwest Florida area. This is a site you all know very well, Margaritaville on Fort Myers Beach. Our members got to come down and get a behind-the-scenes tour of the project under construction. But not only that, we really got to hear about all the challenges and struggles that were going on at the time, as well as all the great opportunity this is going to bring to the town. And finally, with our students, we always host a Day in the Life panel at Florida Gulf Coast University, and this allows for the students to really hear about all the different avenues that they can take after graduation, and that they're not just have to be a realtor and sell houses, and all the different avenues that are available to them. So I hope that just kind of gives you a better understanding of who ULI is on a national level, as well as who we are as ULI Southwest Florida. And now I will turn things over to Lauren to explain more about the Advisory Services panel.
Thanks, Jackie. As she mentioned, my name is Lauren Callahan. I'm a Senior Director with the Advisory Services Program. And thank you so much for having us here today. As Jackie so clearly illustrated, ULI is its members. And the Advisory Services Program represents one way in which ULI members deliver on our mission by bringing their passion for their professions and making an impact on the built environment and to communities worldwide. For 75 years, ULI's Advisory Services Program has matched the brightest minds in real estate with the toughest problems facing communities. Advisory Services panels are on a wide range of topics, everything from infrastructure changes to developing rebuilding strategies to proactively identifying opportunities for better, healthier lives for communities and cities around the world. Over the last 75 years, we have solved land use and real estate problems in more than 700 communities worldwide, made recommendations to improve more than 400 downtowns, and have made transformative impact in over 21 countries. So what is the difference with an advisory services program and the advisory services panels? We bring together a multidisciplinary team of leaders within the real estate and planning industries who are volunteering their time, sometimes for up to 5 full days, to tackle a particular challenge in a community across the country. And they are providing independent and objective and candid advice. They work with public leaders and are not afraid to ask the tough questions in order to hopefully illuminate some of the best and most unique pathways forward. So how does this work? Ultimately, this process is grounded in what a community needs. First, we start with conversations such as this, with community leaders, community members, to better understand what a community is struggling with, what topics and challenges are they interested in tackling. Then, ULI recommends an interdisciplinary team of ULI members to come together to look and assess that particular challenge. Then we hold an advisory services panel engagement. This is an immersive workshop-style engagement that lasts typically 2.5 to 5 days and ends with ultimately a report that's a culmination of all of the recommendations and all of the time that these experts have spent addressing the topic at hand. So what are the key elements of an advisory services panel engagement and leveraging our member leaders to tackle a particular project and problem? Well, it starts with listening and learning. A panel engagement involves a sponsor briefing, a site tour of the location, as well as stakeholder interviews with anywhere from 30 to up to 100 stakeholders within the community. Then the panel comes together and they deliberate and prepare a set of strategic recommendations on the topic. And then they offer their expert solutions. They make a presentation at the end of that 2.5 to 5 day period that are the recommendations that they believe can be implemented immediately, and steps can be taken to really start to address the challenge that they've been presented. And then there's ultimately a final report that's delivered that really finalizes the details around those recommendations and provides a document that can be shared and distributed. So advisory services panels are convened by the ULI National or Headquarters Office in close collaboration with the local district councils. We recognize that by leveraging national and international members, we're providing that independent, candid advice, but we need that local grounding, the knowledge of what's really happening on the ground. So we leverage our local district council members to provide some of that insight. And these panels themselves happen over 3.5 to 5 days. What's really great about spending this length of time is that we're able to tackle a scope that's about a big picture topic and allows for bringing together best practices from these national experts to address the challenges that are most pressing to the community. Ultimately, though, we're interested in working with communities and with hopefully your community to tailor ULI's technical assistance to what's really needed on the ground. So here's a couple of examples. We've actually already worked in Southwest Florida in collaboration with the local district council. In 2017, we looked at affordable housing in Collier County. We were asked to come in to focus on housing affordability and address issues of policy, community engagement, and development strategies. We were also asked in 2022 prior to Ian, to come in and work with Cape Coral to look at primarily topics around economic development and planning. But specifically related to hurricane recovery, our program actually was active in 2018, in particular, working with 2 communities in their hurricane recovery efforts. We worked in Toa Baja, Puerto Rico, about a year after Hurricane Maria. And we were asked to come in and help the community identify ways to better prepare for extreme weather events and how a municipality can enhance social, economic, and climate resilience through investments, partnership, and land development processes. These are some highlights of the recommendations, but they really focused on how does the community prepare and be ready to go when they do receive federal funding? How do they identify development zones at higher elevations to encourage and incentivize development? To organize and empower the local residents and build social capacity? To designate a municipal resilience liaison to really from top to bottom have conversations around resilience within the community? And to incorporate nature-based design systems and recreational opportunities around one of their major assets, the Rio de la Plata River. As well as, finally, prioritizing code compliance among new and existing construction and strengthening the electrical infrastructure within Toa Baja, which is a particularly notable challenge in Puerto Rico. And then I actually attended and participated in the panel in Port Aransas, Texas, which occurred about a year after Hurricane Harvey made landfall just north of the island, and which led to an active, ongoing recovery effort in the year prior to this advisory services panel occurring. We were asked to come in and look at economic potential, housing issues, and the downtown corridor as the community was rebuilding after Harvey. Key recommendations that we provided to this community included updating the comprehensive plan and really reviewing supporting policy documents and enforcement procedures so that they holistically set the community on a path to move forward and work in all of those efforts into the rebuilding process long term. Regularly track key socioeconomic data and market data, something that would not only help to provide input into those planning efforts, but also could be used to attract additional investment and interest into the community. Put in place tools to maintain long-term rentals for future permanent residents to help address affordable and workforce housing, and to consider catalytic development projects and street improvements in their old downtown area, which they were interested in really revitalizing because it had been the home of life, of kind of the center of the island and the island life. And they were interested in seeing how they could rebuild in a way that provided design prototypes for what they wanted their downtown to look like, and to really help take the first stages to revitalizing their downtown corridor.
Could I just stop you right there? Because I'm just trying to get a little bit more granular here in terms
Sure.
of your deliverables.
Uh-huh.
So I think we're envisioning an entity that could literally help put together a plan with design plans, architectural drawings, formal plans as opposed to just recommendations. Do you guys get that granular, or is it more kind of broader policy recommendations? In other words, do you have a team that puts together formal plans of what you would suggest for particular areas that you target in a community?
Well, as with the example with Port Aransas, we did put together a potential plan for the community to consider related to programs of use for their downtown area. But what we do is really help the community come together, bring together all of the different stakeholders to present a broader, higher level vision and plan for the community. And it can feature policy elements and plans themselves, but we see this typically as a first step to start then additional work that can get more granular in the future.
So if we, as a community, it's been a year since the hurricane, so we've had a lot of these conversations, if you will, and I think we're hoping to move forward with the next step, which is with the specific design plans, suggestions, recommendations. It sounds like, I mean, could this still be helpful a year after the hurricane when we've already had a lot of these broader conversations and we're really ready to get granular, I believe, at least from my perspective? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does this still fit? It seems like this would be, better right after a storm when you're trying to gather and sort of bring everyone together to get some strategic direction. But I think we've kind of been through that phase now. We're looking for some granular suggestions of literally design plans, ideas from architects and planners who literally could put something on paper where we could see what prospectively it would look like. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's something that we can do at a high level for sure within the course of this particular engagement. Because what is so great about a panel is we're bringing together planners and developers and architects. And if there's a particular area that needs focus, we can look over the course of that 5 days at and focus in on that area and bring together all of the input that you've already done and all the work that you've already done, and take that to then present out that initial vision, what that might look like. It would be illustrative, and it would be something that then you could use to build upon to do further additional planning work and efforts.
But you can do that within 5 days? You can actually have a detailed set of plans to suggest?
It wouldn't be a detailed set of plans. It would look similar. It would look similar to that. So that's an elevation. And then I can actually provide this report to you to give you a sense of what the actual plan looked like. There can be a parcel, a set of parcel map that will have, from the panel's perspective, over the course of those 5 days and what they've gathered and the work that's already been done that they've been able to brought to bear, a sense of where they would recommend then putting certain uses, different zones. But it is something that would be, I would say, a first step to then working at a more granular level after this engagement.
Okay, thank you.
And I just to go on the kind of point you talked about, one of your slides you mentioned helping with the community block grant funding, the DR funding.
Right.
Now, did you come up with a plan that was sufficient to apply for those funds?
We have within our membership a number of professionals who work with federal funding and have experience working in their own communities as well as with communities that we can bring together to provide recommendations on how to be ready to either set up an application or to be ready once the funds are received to really take action. But
Yeah.
they wouldn't necessarily be putting together the application.
Because one of my concerns is that, there is this funding that's available, but we need something, if we're going to ask for something, we need to have it, planned out to a certain level. I'm not sure what level that is, how detailed it has to be, whether it's just a concept, but we need, something to put in our packet to visualize, this is what we want to do.
Well, and one thing that advisory services panels are particularly well positioned to do is provide an expert set of recommendations on what to prioritize, how to prioritize efforts, what to do first, what are the key pieces that need to be brought together to move forward to implementation, and what are the first steps to implementing the plan that they do propose.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
We may have, go ahead and finish, and then we may
Well,
still
this
have-
was actually my last slide.
Oh, that was, okay.
Oh.
It was, and then I was going to open it up to questions, so that works really well.
So just back to the funding piece. So it sounds like the resources, in terms of how you're set up, the resources to actually apply for those funds and strategically lobby and pursue those funds, that's not a piece of your puzzle. You kind of lead folks to sort of prepare and set up for making the application, but you don't get engaged in the lobbying and or grant proposal process. Is that fair?
Yes, that
Okay.
is fair.
Okay.
We have, I've on a different panel, we were able to bring to bear someone who has worked in a housing authority, who has directly dealt with federal funding and who was able to provide her expert recommendations on how to assist the housing, on how the housing authority might look and prioritize their efforts based on if they were to receive federal funding or elements along the lines of what was successful in her case, in her housing authority, to receive funds. But ultimately, what we are not providing that process. We are thinking, when you think about the 5-day, we're at a bigger picture set of recommendations that are bringing all the pieces together with all of the different disciplines within our membership to be able to hopefully catalyze that next step of moving from plan to implementation. Ultimately, what we are thinking.
I thought they brought 2 people. I hear 3.
There was a ghost of me in the room.
Oh, you're going to have trouble going to sleep tonight.
I thought there was something spooky about this room.
I will also say that I'm happy. There are reports for both of the examples I gave. Actually, all 4 of those different advisory services panels that I mentioned, we have reports, and I'd be happy to provide those to Andy and to you all so that you can review and get a sense of where our sweet spot is, for a better way to say it, on our recommendations and the value we provide. We like to say this process is really helpful in sparking change and in igniting the interest and bringing together all of the different elements to really help tackle a challenge or move a project forward.
Very good. Additional questions for our presenter today?
So I guess I'm just a little bit confused. because I look at what Tidal Basin has done, and then Eddie, can't remember his last name, on the comp plan and that kind of thing, and we've all decided that we're not really changing our process in the comp plan. So in my mind, what we're really looking at is a planner or planning and taking all those elements that we've already decided on, and the funding that goes through Tidal Basin and all that kind of thing, and then coming up with, what do we want it to look like? Am I missing something?
I think there's certainly a lot. I kind of agree with what you're saying, Karen. We're a pretty small island. We're limited by a 2-lane road that we don't control, and we already have commercial areas. We have, because one of the first things people they say, oh, you need commercial nodes up and down our long, skinny island. We already have those zoned commercially. I think, to me, it's like, I think about those people who own those properties, and a lot of them are on the market, and they don't quite know what they can do with it. That we can provide guidance saying, what does a small-scale commercial node look like? Do we want to allow some, we want some housing in there along with whatever the retail and that kind of thing. And those are already up and down the island. And the other is, do we want to just like this kind of sketch or this kind of sketch for a vision for Old San Carlos? Because a lot of places are going to be rebuilding. There's still places there that are along Old San Carlos are just parking lots. That if we provided a plan, I don't want, maybe a template's too strong of a word, but certainly a visioning plan, that then we can set our policies to let people execute that on their own. I mean, those are kind of the things I see as important.
The other thing this process does is you bring together a group of professionals who have decided to set aside time and volunteer for this, and they are passionate. And they deep dive, and sometimes they have to be reeled back in because there's only a certain amount of time. But one of the things that is a real asset to what having these individuals come together and really focus on the set of questions that are offered by a community is that they will look at those questions, but they won't just stop there. They will, as they take in all of the information, this is where that third party expertise is so valuable, is they will also look at what are the questions that haven't been asked. Is there, what are the tough questions that maybe haven't been addressed yet that can be drawn into this, that can really help hopefully set a community on the path to move forward. And I'm not saying that not all stone has been, there's not a stone that hasn't been unturned, but I think that is something that has been something that has really moved a lot of communities, is that inevitably the panel comes back and responds to questions that the communities didn't even know they had.
Very good. Any additional questions for our speaker? Well, thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciate your input, and we'll be working with our town staff and figuring out next steps.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is prioritizing public benefits. What is a public benefit? Councilor Veach, I believe you requested this item to be put on the M&P list. Do you want to introduce the subject?
Okay. We had a conversation with one of our joint LPA meetings about public benefit, which I feel like we kind of got down the weeds. I know that a lot of this is revisiting because Jason Green had he had gave us some examples, which are in the packet now, about how people have used a point system. But I don't think there's much traction with that. If I recall, I don't think the LPA town council really was in favor of coming with a point system and said want to leave it kind of case-by-case basis. But I think it is important to really define a public benefit so the people know what it is the community wants and what we value, and it would have some some perks for visual densities or whatever else.
Do you want to begin the discussion on what you believe is a public benefit? Because I've actually prepared a list last night. I assume you've got some ideas. Do you want to begin the process of fleshing that out?
Well, of course, I'm a big, as you said in one of the points, affordable housing is a big thing, and I'd like to see that happen. My preference would be that if the market handled that, but I don't necessarily see that happening very easily. I think that to me is a big public benefit if someone were going to have that as part of their project. I also, I know in certain areas, like down south, there is a shortage of beach accesses. That in the north there seems to be plenty, but in the south you can go miles without hitting a bona fide beach access. I think any kind of open space is valuable. I think I agree. I know that it's, transportation is a real big issue on our island. But it's also very complicated. I think that it's hard to get something that's going to make a real substantive change to the traffic on the island with our 1-2 lane road. And I also think that our idea of encouraging people to come, which I'm actually in favor of, to not come with a car, to change the paradigm from moving people and not moving cars, I think is valuable. But then I was reading a story in one of our local papers about evacuation and putting people in harm's way. Because if we do encourage people to come without their car and there's a storm, how are we going to get them to safety? So I think there's a lot of aspects to that. But I'd like to hear your list, Jim.
Well, this is just really, it's in no particular order. It's just fodder for intellectual conversation and digestion. I started the list, and this actually would be my lead item as I would consider a project. And for folks who are listening, I mean, when an entity comes before the council and through the CPD process, one of the factors that we're allowed to consider as they ask for various variations in the land development code is public benefit. So it's a little bit of an innocuous, vague term. But I think it's a good term because, I'll illustrate it with some examples. First of all, traffic congestion mitigation to me is a huge piece of the puzzle. I think we can have an impact on traffic congestion. At a minimum, we certainly can do things to not exacerbate the traffic congestion when a project comes. I came up with this concept the other day called DRAC incentives, DRAC, do not rent a car incentives. And here's how it would work. So a hotel would say to their guest, if you don't rent a car and you come either through a car service or through Uber or Lyft, we will give you a $50 credit. If you stay for three days or more, you'll get a $50 credit to take you from the airport to our hotel. And then we'll also, if you stay again 3 days, we'll give you additional $50 credit to get you back to the airport. That eliminates the concept of a shuttle service. I've talked to a number of hoteliers who tell me, gosh, the shuttle service, we love the concept, but when they're coming from the airport to Fort Myers Beach and they get stuck in traffic for an hour and a half or 2 hours on our shuttle, immediately their guest experience is not good and they're connecting it to our hotel. They're not big fans of the shuttle service, but this DRAC incentive could defer it to the private sector. Again, not many hotels would do this, so it would be, I think, a very positive experience for the guest. I think it would create a good relationship with the hotel, and again, eliminate the need for the shuttle service, and potentially really help on that front. I think if a development is in a situation to have property on both sides of the street, I think the pedestrian walkover concept is huge. I think there's numerous opportunities on our island to have that. And I think, just to digress a second, Councilor Veach, on the point system, one of the challenges of the point system, and I'll use the pedestrian walkover as an example. If you have a pedestrian walkover down at the outrigger, from Charlie's over to the outrigger, that's great. But if you have one at the Red Coconut, where they have property on both sides, that's better. And then if you have one at the Lani Kai, that's even better. So having a generic point system for that would be difficult because there's greater value depending on where you are in the island and how much traffic congestion you actually would mitigate with your particular proposal. I think there's opportunities to have design work in terms of how you enter and exit Estero Boulevard. There's ways you can design your entrance and exit in ways that help or minimize impact on traffic.
So are you talking about like egresses?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, egresses and so forth. And there's design work that you can do that may take a little extra your space, but it could really help, again, gaining entrance and exit to Estero without slowing traffic down. And
I think an important point of that I've just, if you don't mind me, Jim, interjecting, is I know you already have some rules about where they put the pay booth for paid parking lots. Because I have seen in Estero where people are backed up because they're all queuing to get into a parking lot.
I think that's a great example. Yeah, exactly. And I think again, another piece of this puzzle is granting a public right-of-way to the town. So we could potentially, if the entity is on Estero, we could increase the size and width of the bike lanes. That's another item that could be considered as a public benefit. I think any entity that utilizes or supports the creation of a water ferry through the use of commercial marinas, we would also, again, obviously encourage that water taxi to service entities like the Mound House and Lover's Key, et cetera. Bike rental would be a smaller public benefit, but again, a smaller development may not be able to do some of these larger items, but they could certainly have bikes for rent or free bikes available for any guests. I think another intangible, it'll be difficult to measure this, but as an early participant in the economic recovery of the island. In other words, if they've got their plans right before us today versus a year from now, I think they're contributing to the restoration of the island by being an early entrant. And I think that has some value as we look at it. For example, the first hotel that comes in with 150 rooms, I think has a lot more value than the 20th hotel that comes in. So I think it's not the consideration, but it could be a consideration. I think an entity that offers space for small businesses to incubate or operate out of could be a real public benefit given our challenges on this island. We've got 2 shopping centers that I'll just name them, Sea Grape and Key Estero, that are in extremely volatile situation. And those are 2 of our key incubators and opportunities for small businesses. So if another entity comes forth and provides spaces for small business, I think that could be a huge plus for the island, given the volatility particularly of those locations. I think we need places to get a haircut, to go to the dentist, to go to have a florist, maybe potentially get a bank to come back here. Anything we could do to not have to leave the island again, that would also help on the traffic front as well as just the quality of life. As you said, Councilor Veach, offering a beach access as part of your proposal would be great particularly in certain areas. Discounts for locals. That we saw the Margaritaville offering a 25% discount to locals. Again, not the deciding factor, but just another option to provide public benefit for particularly for our locals here. And again, if it's too onerous for some small business, maybe they just offer that in the off season, to help increase their business during the off season, because during season they generally don't have as many challenges. Let's see, view corridors of the Gulf would be another piece of the puzzle. A willingness to build the property back from Estero so you don't have that canyon effect. Maybe they get a little additional height if they have the luxury of moving back off Estero. I think we're going to see that in some of the plans potentially coming before us.
I just let me interject in that,
Yeah.
Jim, because part of our plan now is the downtown area has 0 setbacks, and I think the reason is that's considered more walkable. So I guess maybe are you talking about throughout the island or just?
Well, I think it'll be on a case-by-case situation. I think you may see a situation in the Red Coconut property where they may say, "Gosh, we're not going to develop as much on the beach," and that's a huge public benefit because we're going to leave that open. We may have one facility there to service the development that we have on the Gulf or on the bay side. And if they decide they have the luxury of so much land, if they decided to move those buildings much further back off Estero, so that it wouldn't be as again canyon effect like, particularly if they needed some additional height, particularly if they stay within their density requirements, I think one could argue that that's a pretty strong public benefit. Again, each one is going to be somewhat individual, depending on the luxury of how much property they have to work with and how large it is. I'm just throwing out suggestions here, just of ideas that could be real public benefits. Again, let's see, like amenities that are offered by the development. It could be a public benefit. Unique architectural design could be a public benefit. Attracting a business that is in demand on the island, for example, a bank. Or if the movie theater closes down, maybe somebody as part of their development, they have a movie theater, something that, again, could be interesting or a positive to the community. Obviously, we're looking for a dentist and a doctor's office, and we've talked about a number of other ideas. An effort to attract workers, if they have a plan to attract workers with elementary school-age children, that would benefit our beach school. Somebody who offers a pocket park as part of their proposal, offering restrooms that are open to the public, a drinking fountain, an easement for a bike path. You look at behind the Red Coconut, there's some opportunities there to create some kind of a bike path through there to allow sort of a secondary route of transportation, not for cars, but for bikes and walkers. That could be a real public benefit. The facilitation of the development of for workers to live on location of their island. For example, a small business had a place upstairs where the owner could live above their business. I think that's a potential public benefit. A landscaping plan that's attractive or unique could be a public benefit. Hosting a public service like a sheriff's office station there, or a bank or a mini post office could be a public benefit. Willingness to pay an impact fee to help offset some of the public works costs for the town could be a public benefit. Again, I think the list is pretty lengthy of things that could be offered. And again, this is just food for thought. But I think this public benefit concept we're in a very unique situation, Fort Myers Beach, that we're in the driver's seat for kind of determining the future of this island, and we can encourage and or discourage certain things depending on what is deemed the public benefit for our island. And again, a lot of this will come out in the public hearings that occur through the LPA and the council. The public will have a lot of opportunity to weigh in. There'll be a lot of negotiations with each developer, but to your point, I think it's important for people for us to let people know what we're looking for. And I know that probably happens in a lot of these discussions that go on with developers individually with the counselors. But I think but you had asked for a list, and that was just a preliminary list of ideas of things. Again, some small, some significant, but we also have very small developments. We've got very large developments, and a number of these I referenced in this list are in the Margaritaville development. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the island. I'm so fearful. If we're not creative and open-minded about these things, we're going to have a developer that's completely risk-adverse, and they want to get a return on their investment, so they'll just build high-end condos with very little public benefit, and they'll build that by right, and that'll be the end of it. And that's fine, I guess, but I think we're missing out on so many opportunities for the island if we don't try to engage with these developers to try to find some public benefit and amenities. So that's a long rant, if you will, but I came prepared. So.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of your things. I would add, though, because one of the things I've been talking about with everybody is if you're getting involved in a water taxi service or water ferry, we missed the boat, if so to speak, on canal dredging because we never maintain them and that kind of thing. We can't get reimbursement for that. So along with that water ferry, that water taxi, you start contributing to the initial dredging of the canal, the maintenance of the canals, maintenance of our waterways. So that to me would be a huge benefit just to get us kick-started. I mean, every canal needs to be dredged. The entire back bay needs to be dredged. And so
just to clarify, so are you talking about, though, if someone has, if there's a water taxi, and I assume this would be an association of businesses maybe that would run this, that part of the responsibility would not only be to maintain the canals they use, but try to maintain all the canals on the island?
Not maybe all the canals, and maybe it's just contributing to the pot that maintains all the canals, that they don't specifically, because I don't know, I'm looking here and I don't know how that exactly works. I don't know what entities are involved in that, but contributing to the cost share of doing that, which we don't have now. I mean, no business is responsible or takes any participation in canals. But it is a major focus of a water community.
So one thing to consider when you're thinking about what can be requested in exchange for providing some additional density, intensity, or a use that is special, is that there has to be a nexus between what we're asking them to provide and what they're asking us for. So if if we did want to do some sort of a cost sharing with all the canals, it would have to be a very formalized program, or it would have to be pretty specific about what we were asking them for. It couldn't be just a generally put money in this pot that maintains the town. So it would have to be applying to what they were requesting from us. So, I mean, that's just something to consider on all of these. You know, when they are asking for something additional, what's a reasonable nexus for what we're asking of them?
And I would, you know, when you were going through the list, and it's a good list, and Sarah, your list that you provided in the packet is pretty comprehensive too. But one thing one kind of tale of caution is I know there was a hotel on the island, and they wanted, when they did a development, they want to take density from the other side of Estero onto their property. And so they did that, and the agreement was, and that becomes open space. Then a couple councils later, they go in and they say, well, we want to take that open space and make it into a parking lot. And that council allowed it. And then I think subsequently they just sold the land. And again, the council allowed it. So some things like, you know, if a water taxi made economic sense on its own, it probably already exists. So I think things like that, to come up with the kind of teeth. And I know you said, you know, we've talked before, you really can't bind future councils. But, you know, if people are going to claim this as an incentive, then they have to, I think, have a long-term commitment to operate the water taxi and on a schedule and with rates, so that you know, I'm just thinking kind of devil's advocate that people will try to game the system. How can we make sure that the incentives will be around for as long as the benefit?
I think that's a fair point, and I have actually had some concern about the water tax, initially had some concerns, but it appears, and again, I don't want to speak out of turn because it's still all developing, but it appears the water taxi is going to be its own business. And they've looked at business models around Florida where it does not have to be a loser. They're making money in other places in Florida off this water taxi concept. And I think if they do it right, it could be extremely successful. And I think just because it hasn't been done, I think quite honestly it's not a precondition that it's not going to be successful. I think, again, I've talked to some of the principals involved in this, but to your point, Bill, if somebody wants to take credit for the water taxi as part of an offset for an additional ask, they ought to have some skin in the game. And that is a little bit more challenging, particularly if that water taxi is operated by an independent developer. But if they are going to participate in the water taxi, if they're going to provide facilities for the water taxi, and be supportive of its maybe they're a partner, maybe they help offset costs, maybe there's ways that they can do it. But I think they should have to demonstrate what their commitment is. But I do think that's of tremendous value to this island, because I refuse to say there's nothing we can do about the traffic congestion. I will not accept that premise. We can, at a minimum, we can make sure this new development doesn't exacerbate it, but I think we can do better than that with all these different potential opportunities available to us. But to your point, I think you're right. If you're going to claim that as a benefit, a public benefit, you should have some skin in the game and be able to demonstrate that.
Yeah, and you know, I think that the other thing is, if you're downtown, I think, you know, one of the big markets for a water taxi would simply be from where a good hunk of our population is, down at Bay Beach Lane, to downtown where a good part of our entertainment venues are. Just that in itself. And if you have any savvy as a businessman, you would want that to, you know, park out in front of your business.
Well, and I also think we could look at, and what is being looked at is from across the bridge. So people don't even come over the bridge. They park over off of Main Street somewhere and water taxi over. And so then that's one stop, and then you can pick up other things going along the intercoastal. But a huge benefit would be if they don't even bring a car to the island to begin with.
Yeah, and you know, I think that I know this, it's been proposed before, and there were different characters involved in, but San Carlos Island has said in the past that they don't want to be the parking lot for Fort Myers Beach. But
Well, things are changing pretty radically over there, and I agree with Councilor Woodson. I think that could be a huge benefit for some of the, particularly employees, to be able to park there and take the boat across to work. And quite honestly, the water taxi will service a lot of the businesses over there on that island as well. A lot of those marinas, that could be a part of it. I'm guessing the water taxi service will actually originate from the island over there. So, and then there's other opportunities, to Karen's point, on the south end of the island, if there's a way to capture part of Lover's Key on the other side of Estero Boulevard for another stop, there could be a parking opportunity there, never even getting onto the island, hop on the boat, head down to the north end, no traffic. And the way this water taxi, and they're talking about having a stop at the Mound House, which would probably double the amount of visitors to the Mound House, which would be a great, if you're a hotel or a resort and it's a rainy day and you got kids, you got nothing to do, what a great day to hop the boat over to the Mound House and certainly support the Mound House. I think you've got a situation where they're going to sell annual passes for locals, so you can hop on that boat whenever you want, use it, and the boat will probably stop, make all these various stops: Fishtail Marina, Snook Bite, Moss Marina, Mound House, some places in San Carlos Island, and so you'll have a lot of different places to stop. And again, potentially park, potentially, and I think you may even see other water ferries come into play once this starts to demonstrate success. And this to me, we're getting off subject a little bit, but I do think it has great potential to not only to be a help to help traffic congestion, but also to be a moneymaker, which is great.
You know, and I know this is way off topic, but it kind of goes in to the whole traffic feed and everything, but, you know, working with Lee County and getting our bridges to be toll, like Sanibel. And maybe you have a resident pass and you pay minimally per month, or you pay nothing.
Just let me interject there. It's against the Florida Constitution to have like a toll for some people and not for others. I know that.
Well, I'm not saying that they don't get a toll at all, but it could be a different pricing.
And I think
for
like
residents.
in Sanibel, there's a discount if you have so much, but that's from the state. That's for every toll, right? That if you have more than, I don't know, 50 or 100 tolls, then you get a discount.
I mean,
but I'm just saying that, you know, that would mean that everybody on the island, everyone who lives here is going to pay a toll every time they come on and off. That's just my, because, you know, a lot of these ideas, and I appreciate them. I think that, you know, I do like the idea of the water taxi and getting some structure to that, because I know the county had once upon mentioned Bunchy Beach as a potential place to have the water taxi go to, where there is a parking lot that's off island and off island far enough where it's not getting in the traffic on the island. I think those have a lot of benefit. I think that how to package that up as a public benefit would be, I don't know, maybe something like the Urban Land Institute has some experience with, you know, and if there's any facilities that need to be put in, maybe a lot of these marinas don't really have a facility to handle something of that size or the space. But I do really like the idea. I know I went through and it's happened over and over with town councils, because traffic is on people's minds for 3 months of the year, that they proposed everything from running a gondola from off island on to, I think, even, you know, water tax at the time. And I think the traffic study said that it, like the gondola and stuff, it just doesn't move enough people. So it's more of a novelty and an attraction as opposed to something to, you know, really help with traffic. But I do understand your point. You know, we're kind of chipping away. Right, we're not going to build a 6-lane highway down to Estero Boulevard to solve our traffic problems. So you kind of chip away at it. But I think when you say that, you know, you refuse to believe that we can't have an effect on traffic, I do think that we can make things worse if we're not smart about it.
Yeah, and I hate the word. I hate the word, but the word water taxi is really a misnomer. It's a water ferry, and these boats will carry up to 49 people, and they'll have numerous boats. So it'll be, again, isn't going to solve the traffic congestion problem, but anything we could do to mitigate it. Plus, it'll be a pleasant experience. Watch the sunset, have a beverage, go to your favorite restaurant, shop, and then come home. No drinking and driving. I mean, and you could walk literally from these marinas to the residential neighborhoods. I mean, it's such a home run, and I'm so hopeful it's successful.
And I think that, you know, to make it a public benefit, though, I think we've got to come up with a real solid plan. You know, so we make sure it's not.
That was just an example. I've listed 50 of these things, or 25 of them. So I mean, it's just an idea that it's just one of the factors that if somebody's participating and encouraging and supporting it's not going to be the key decision maker for development, but it certainly should be considered because it's a nice piece. It's not only a traffic congestion piece; it's a quality of life piece as well. Because on the south end of the island, during season, people say, and I flippantly say, well, nobody ever goes north, and they head to Bonita Springs and Naples for entertainment and meals, etc. And they do, and but there are people, when people come to town, you got to take them down to Times Square and the pier and all that, and you want to, and you'll get in that traffic fight, and so to have that ferry option. Not only does it help traffic congestion, quality of life, because it'll be a beautiful ride down there, but it will help economic development because it'll keep those dollars here in Fort Myers Beach. Because I'm telling you what, you go to the south end, people have all their favorite restaurants down in Bonita and Naples, and they'll drive an hour, and I mean, it's crazy. So, but I'm sure many of those folks would love to keep those dollars here on the island, and many of them do in Santini Plaza. But you can't. It's extremely difficult to go north during season, and some people will fight it when they've got family and friends in town. But it'll be a paradigm shift for the island if it can be done successfully. And having heard some of the folks involved in this, they seem very serious about it, and I wish them nothing but the best. But we're getting kind of off subject here.
Yeah. But I just, going through your list, Jim, there's a lot of really good ideas, and a lot of these have been talked about before. I think, of course, some of them don't have a great, the idea of getting people to say, don't rent a car, certainly having things like a water taxi or other kind of transportation options would help convince people to not have a car. If they can have a bike to use, or they can get in a water taxi, that's certainly, those things maybe can be packaged together somehow. And I don't know, it's something that how if the hotel isn't really that interested and they just want the benefit, then I guess the real benefit would be almost without us providing it. Maybe you say, if you do this program, then you need less parking, right? That's a direct correlation to saying that if you say, if you're going to have a program to help subsidize people coming back and forth from the airport, then maybe you can relax the parking requirements.
That's fine. Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I think, again, I've heard the shuttle conversation. As every hotel owner I talk to, they say, Jim, it's first of all, it's hard to get all the hotels to work together, and second of all, the congestion issue. They don't want to be part of that guest experience. But again, there's a number of really good car services on the island, and certainly there's Uber and Lyft that service the island, and it's about $50 to $60 with 60, 65 with tip. So if you give them a nice offset, and there's no hassle, and you come right to the hotel. And again, there's certain hotels that it may work better for. The ones closer to the downtown entertainment district, you really don't need a car. You can use your bike, you could walk, you could get a car. There's a lot of things you can do to really. We want to discourage that rental car at the airport. Again, not a panacea, but anything we can do to help mitigate any additional congestion, I think, is critical. But I'd be curious too, from Sarah's perspective. As everything raises up and we have that first floor now that's open, will we have inherently more parking? Will it have an impact on our parking challenges from the island? In your opinion?
From developers, I'm hearing that it does not necessarily get them to what our current requirements are in most instances. Not all, certainly, but a lot of the development that was built prior to our current land development code, so did not meet a lot of the parking requirements already. Or if it was done through a CPD or an RPD, it maybe didn't provide the number of parking spaces that are required by the code. So a lot of developers are still running into issues with not having enough parking, and are going to be coming forward and asking to do CPDs and asking for less parking. So having these options available to them, having some sort of, this is what we're hoping to see, some examples, will probably help these developers come up with options that might get some cars off the road, that might decrease their parking requirements, because a lot of them are still going to need it.
Very good. Anybody else? Yes, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Nancy, introduce yourself to folks who don't know you already, because I know
Hi.
you're, yeah.
My name is Nancy Stuprich, and I'm an attorney with the Vos Law Firm, and I get the privilege of sitting with the town council today in Becky's absence. I just wanted to add my 2 cents, and I've heard your discussion, the things that are concerned to me as far as a legal perspective, and that is that all of these potential public benefits are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and I heard that discussion. Also that they're not too onerous. And then the last one that Sarah brought up was making sure that there actually is that nexus. And a lot of the case law, when communities have gotten in trouble in this area, have been with that nexus component. So definitely whatever you decide on a case-by-case basis, it's got to be tied back to that particular project. So I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that, but I heard it through your discussion, and I was going to be quiet, but then it's like I couldn't resist.
Well, Nancy, just to be clear on that, so when we say case by case, yeah, when I say restroom that's open to the public, it would clearly be on the property that's being developed, not
Yes.
not some restroom a mile down the island, right? But that's your point, right? It's got to be
Absolutely.
related directly to the development
Yes.
in question. Okay.
Yes.
Now, is it to the, so I'm just thinking of it, now, does the benefit itself have to be specific to it? So like, if we're saying, if someone does the don't rent a car thing and they are partners with a water taxi and they have free bikes for people, then would it be more appropriate to give them a reduction in number of parking spaces? Or do we get in trouble if we give them density or height or any other kind of benefit?
Probably tying it back to the parking spaces, but again, I don't want to make some general, I want to keep it open, as you all have been discussing, to allow ideas and opportunities to come forward, but just to really focus once something is presented, to make sure that there is that nexus and everyone is okay with that.
And while there does have to be a national rational nexus, what you said about density, usually one of the things that we're considering when we're looking at a new development is the impact of that additional density on our roadways. You know, there's also going to be utilities and, you know, a lot of other things associated with that additional density. But, you know, if traffic is one of the concerns that we're like, no, you can't build this because you're going to put too many cars on the road, and then if they're willing to provide some benefit that potentially decreases cars, you can tie it back in. So you can look at a wider view. So we don't want to necessarily limit it, but just having this conversation and having a potential list does help a developer kind of understand what has value to the community.
And I would also think that I know that, you know, I'm a big fan of trying to design things to bring people on the island instead of necessarily cars, but I am concerned reading some of the stories about evacuation times. And then that would be, you know, the response. I mean, it seems to me that the hoteliers would have the most difficult task if a storm came, because if they have half the people in the hotel who don't have a car and maybe don't know where to go, don't know what the shelters are, then that puts, to me, a lot of responsibility on them. And the last thing a hotel wants to do is have such a difficult task about evacuating their guests that they evacuate guests prematurely when they really don't need to. Because, you know, that's a game everyone plays during a hurricane. You wait and you see where the storm is and you want to like evacuate at the last minute, because if it takes a turn, it's no longer a threat, you don't go. So I think that, you know, that's a concern to me. I know that evacuation time is also, I think it's a Florida, it's got to be a consideration in the Florida rules about if you allow that, if you allow more density to how you get those people off the island in a storm. Now, the mom and pop shop thing you mentioned, I particularly, I think that's very, very good, Jim. I appreciate that. I know that's part of what make this island unique, is we had all these little shops up and down. They were all a lot of them locally owned and this kind of thing. Now, with the Urban Land Institute, we have these little nodes already, and a lot of things people don't know quite what to do with it. So I was reading about lean urbanism and the idea of coming up with not like templates, a series of templates that people could say that are all pre-approved, that have incentives that have bonuses. And if they go with one of these and they don't have to go through a variance process, they don't have to get a planner and an attorney, that if it's within the confines of the template, they can do it. And part of the template can be like the size of shops and that kind of thing. Some housing, some retail in a suitable scale for the environment.
Good. I don't want, it's a bit of a non sequitur, but I wanted to be respectful. I got a text from the mayor, who's obviously watching. He said maybe the town offers a shuttle service. It could be run at times we know we can get on and off the island flawlessly. It would promote people to book flights that fit within that free shuttle service times. That's an interesting idea. I mean, everything should be on the table.
Yeah. And I do know from my personal experience, like if I've ever flown into Fort Lauderdale and I need to get back, the buses are never within the time. It means waiting for hours somewhere.
Well, that was before Andy and Frankie were at the helm. See, when they're driving that shuttle at 9, 10 at night, we know they'll be on time. Yep. So
don't forget your cap.
I think for a lot of people, particularly at the higher end, being able to come out of the airport and get a car, just go to the hotel, get a voucher of some sort. I think that is by far the most convenient for people. And the other thing is, maybe instead of getting a shuttle, if we do want to do that, maybe we talk to Letran, find out what we can do to work with Letran to get a regular
And again,
service.
this concept of a DRAC incentive where you literally give them, when they come in, they use a car service, they show their receipt and or Uber. When they check in, they get a $50 credit off their bill. Again, if they're there for 3 days or longer, it encourages them to stay longer, which is great for the hotel. And then on their way back, they get another $50 credit off their bill when they head back to the airport. I just think that could be, again, the guest is going to be surprised pleasantly. My guess is a lot of folks don't offer that. And it might be a way to, in a very streamlined way, discourage people from renting a car without all the bureaucracy of a shuttle service. But again, to me, everything's on the table on that front. So if somebody may have a even more creative idea, they may have figured out a way to solve the shuttle issue. I'm all for it. Whatever we can do, and I think there's a lot of things we ought to be thinking about. But
And I don't think a shuttle and the voucher are necessarily mutually exclusive because there's a lot of price points.
That's fair.
If someone's going to a high-end place, they probably, would go with the more expensive route. If they're just, I don't know if there'll be many low-end places on Fort Myers Beach after all this is said and done.
But you're right. They shouldn't be mutually exclusive. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else for the good of the order on this topic?
Now, one thing, though, I think that's also important is putting some kind of weight to these, because obviously someone providing, public beach access would, I'm guessing it'd be more of a public property, like a hotel would be willing to do that, where a private condo may not. But I'm just wondering, to me, it's important to send the signal to what the weight is, because someone putting, a few trees down is not nearly as valuable or onerous as someone providing like a beach access.
I think there's no question that's true. I think the challenge with putting a weight on it is that some of the smaller entities don't have the space or the luxury or the finances to offer some of the more significant offerings for public benefits. So it's difficult to weight it. I think that's where, quite honestly, common sense comes into play. As we see a larger development, we know they have more flexibility and more freedom and more opportunity to provide more significant public benefit. To me, some of these mom and pop hotels, if they come back and they have a nice architecture, just by them coming back in and of itself is a public benefit because it adds to the ambiance of the island that everyone says that they enjoy, the mom and pop concept. So I think the onus for public benefit would be less on a small mom and pop hotel, boutique hotel. So I think you're right, Bill, but I think it's really going to be more of a common sense piece. When a large development comes in and has a significant ask, I think we're going to all, just naturally be hopeful of significant public benefit. If it's a much smaller development, we're going to understand that their opportunities for public benefit will be less, and we're just going to have to, I think it's because everything is so different, it's going to be difficult to have an equation to have a formula, if you will, but yeah, I think that's the challenge.
I think there's probably workarounds. I mean, I went through the point system that Sarah gave as an example, and of course, 3/4 of those things are things that we just can't do. We just don't have the space to offer or this kind of thing. But I think that it maybe depends on how you couch the incentive, because if you do like density in terms of number of units, then the small development isn't going to be asking for the number of units that a larger development is. If you do like FAR, which applies the entire property, then, scale matters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind, giving Sarah and Jason or some staff direction to just, based on the conversation we've had today, just to try to formalize a little more, and then so we can look at specific items, because a lot of things you said really work well together. The water taxi, the free bikes, the don't rent a car, all those have a synergy that it'd be nice to see we can wrap that up in a way where it's easy for people to access, and we have at our core, the water taxi as the transportation element that makes people more willing to come without a car.
I think, and you probably have to go back and listen to the tape, but Sarah, to put together a list of all the things we've discussed today, it's just to give developers an idea of what we're potentially looking for, and to Bill's point, there is a synergy amongst some of these subgroups, if you will. I think, again, smart people in your business, Sarah, could come up with suggestions as to how your egress and your entrance and exit to Estero could be designed in a way that would not slow traffic on Estero. And then you could almost have a template to suggest to developers, assuming they have the luxury to yield some of that space, or suggest to developers who could maybe cede to the town some right-of-way to increase the width of the bike lanes, particularly as we get on the northern end of the island. I think you just need to, some of these folks may need a little bit of guidance, if you will. They don't have to follow it exactly, but anything we can do to sort of, I think to Bill's point, is to let it be known these are the things that we're looking for. That could be helpful. And again, depending on the size of and the type of development, obviously certain public benefits will fit certain developments better than others, but at least they'll have a sense of what's out there and what the island might find interesting. And again, there's probably a number of things that I didn't mention that the public will have an interest in as well. So we can continue to add to this list as well.
And, I've proposed before we have a couple of small spots on the island where you can do off of Estero, like a bike path, that I think still have some promise. And there are some like missing links that could help make that longer. I do think, though, and I've talked about the idea of trying to use, some of the grant funding we have to try to acquire some right-of-way. I can't imagine a world where you're going to get everybody along Estero to give up right-of-way to make that a continuous path. 100% by choice, and if you eminent domain, then you're basically excluding yourself from a lot of the funding. So there's a bit of a catch there.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I haven't heard much of a public outcry for the use of eminent domain. It's not unless there's an emergency for the town. That to me is a last resort. But there may be areas that have enough property frontage where they can make that bike path on a curve or something a little bit wider. But you're right. Unless everybody's involved, it's challenging to help on the bike path. I wish when it was originally designed, they would have maybe figured out a way to protect that bike path a little bit better. But we are where we're at. So,
well, I was told a while ago by an attorney that's been on the island for a while that it used to be a parkway that was originally platted out, and then a lot of the land was vacated to have more room to build along the beach.
Very good. Okay, item C.
Real quick.
Yes,
so please. How would you like to memorialize this conversation? Would you like this as a component of the Land Development Code when we do the update? Would you like it as a list that can annually be updated by the town council and policy can refer to it? What would be your preference? Do you want a reference to this in the comprehensive plan?
I think if we had a list of all the various suggestions, I think we could, again, without putting a point system together, we could at least have a list for guidance purposes, and we could put it in either in the comp plan or in the LDC. But I want to make sure it can be, it can evolve because some of these will get outdated. And it's probably easier in the LDC at that point.
So my thought is that we can also have this as an outside document, and we can refer to it in the land development code and maintain it on our website, and we can update it without having to do
That's
all
fine.
of the process of updating in the ordinance.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to go through that process every time there's a change.
Yeah, somebody says, wait, we don't need any more water taxi money. We need X,
Right.
Y, or Z.
Right.
Well, and you have so many developers coming and they're saying, what are you all looking for? And so at least there's a list that give them some suggestions and things to think about, so.
And that, probably is worth coming up as a little granular, like we talked about the beach access. Maybe we should clarify that, saying a beach access in this area,
And
where we don't
do
have.
have a map that shows the areas where we would be interested in having beach accesses and where they're most valuable.
I know, I'll just say it because I've heard from a lot of the neighbors, there's a real desire at the Wyndham to have a beach access through there preserved, and so that will be certainly for the neighborhoods around the Wyndham, that will be a negotiating item as they look to the perspective plans of the Wyndham. So, but yeah, I think certainly some of those beach access areas are going to be a greater priority than others. But at the same time, even if there's a plethora of beach accesses, if somebody wants to offer that as a beach access or a little pocket park, we don't want to discourage that either, because it's also a view corridor. It serves a number of benefits. So, but you're right. Where they're needed ought to have more weight than where they're not needed.
And also, what might see a list, maybe we have priorities. What are the things that are really important? So there's like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of thing. So we can not just say, so the developer doesn't just go and look at this list and figure out what's the least onerous, that our priorities are
And that's fine.
indicated.
We may have a wrestling match about all that as we all. Yeah.
To a point system.
Yeah, it gets better. But at the same time, I think common sense would say a drinking fountain doesn't have the same weight as a public access, or you know what I mean? It's just a common sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair point. Yeah, fair point.
Well, that could go with the bathroom.
Okay, so next item is item C, and I believe, rumor has it that you asked for this, Councilor King. Do you want to introduce the subject?
Well, this came up at yesterday and a previous Southwest Florida League of Cities that I sit on, representing the town, and it's going to be implemented after the first of the year. So I thought it would be behoove us to at least receive some training on it. It's a more invasive ask for us as public servants, other than the previous generic type form that you could fill out. So that's why I asked it to be on here. I know you have to have it in by July, I believe. It takes effect January 1st. It has to be in by July. And if it's not in by September, I believe, that's when fines start.
Do you want us to yield to Nancy for further elaboration?
Please.
All right.
That was,
Town
that
Attorney?
was
Well,
a very good.
I could go through it, but Nancy
very-
sounds better.
A very good description of it. So the legislation was passed this past session. It became effective of July the 1st, and that then required local elected officials to file a Form 6. As in the past, we had been filing the Form 1. So that was a big change. Form 6, as Councilmember mentioned, it is much more detailed. And so part of the legislation also required the submission of a tax return that has a little bit more of that detailed information. And then as of January 1st, the Form 6 for elected officials would be filed electronically. Those who file Form 1, some of your advisory boards, your city attorney, I think your staff, we still can do a paper copy in 2024, but the following year, we will also be filing electronically. And in your materials, there is a copy of the presentation that was done at the Florida League of Cities this past August, which was just, 1 month after this new legislation came into effect. And the presentation was done by the individuals at the State of Florida Commission on Ethics. And that is the state entity that does monitor your form filings. And that particular PowerPoint, when I was told that, that this topic would be coming up, that was the first thing I went to, and then lo and behold, it was already in your agenda. So I think this is probably the best go-to at this point. As we get closer, more questions will come up. The Ethics Commission will have more answers for us. In their presentation, they did provide their phone numbers. So if you have a specific question, my recommendation to you would be that you go ahead and start looking at the electronic filing requirements and kind of get familiar with those so that it's not a last-minute situation where you have a lot of questions that might take a little bit of time to respond to.
So Nancy, just to be clear, the financial disclosure form, the next one will be due July 1st, 2024, and will have to be filed electronically.
Correct.
And you say they're going to actually require a copy of our tax return as well?
No, it is not required, but that was one change that was made in order to facilitate getting it, instead of going through a lot of excruciating detail, trying to just submit that, because it does have a lot of the information that
Oh,
is
so
going to
you
be
could submit your
required.
tax return in lieu of,
Yes.
filling
yes,
out the
that-
report.
That was my understanding. And you also have the opportunity to request redaction of some of the personal information that might be on that return.
the ethics training, is it still the honor system, or is it more, is that changed as well in terms of doing your CE for your ethics training? That you have to verify that on your
Yes,
financial.
you have to yes, you still have to verify that you have completed that.
Right,
correct.
but it's you take the course on the cities and towns website, and it's kind of an honor system. Is that changed at all, or is that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
You're still obligated to do
Yep.
that. And in your materials also, your agenda materials for today, I did note that there was our PowerPoint presentation that our firm has presented to some of our other local government clients, and we would enjoy, making that same presentation to you on a 4-hour basis to fulfill your requirements. And if that were scheduled, we would also suggest that we invite some of your advisory boards who are also subject to public records and sunshine issues. So we would have one big training for those individuals that need to, that are, subject to it.
Any additional questions for Nancy or John?
I would just say that I think that the training for our boards, especially maybe a regular thing after we change boards every October, if we do our appointments, because I know that there's an awful lot of confusion about the Sunshine Law, and some other bits of ethics. But I just want to thank John for bringing this up, because it's a very invasive form compared to the last one.
Well, yesterday, the Southwest Florida League of Cities meeting I attended, this got brought up again yesterday, and Kevin Anderson from Fort Myers, the mayor there, had mentioned he'd gone on the state website and looked at the forms, and there didn't seem to be any universal following of how it was filed or the information gleaned. So I think the state might have to look at something along those lines. And there was also some concern, no hard evidence yet, of folks that may not run in the future because of how invasive this is, or may actually resign from their positions. So that also will have an impact on future candidates as well, because I'm sure that they'll be required to do that as well. I know last year as a candidate, I had to fill out the Form 1, so.
I wish my finances were so glamorous that I'd have to resign my position, but they're pretty boring, but yeah.
But I do think Nancy was mentioning something that even
I
now.
think that's more of a privacy issue, though.
That's the principle. Yeah.
But I think that Nancy was mentioning that it's right now there's really no way out of it, because if you do resign, there's an exit form you have to fill out, and that's going to have the same information.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Form 6, just like the Form 1.
Doggone government.
There is the actual form, and then there's an amendment form, and then there's the final full disclosure form that I think you're going to have to be, you would have to still fill that out. I am going to try to get clarification from the State Ethics Commission on that, just to make sure, because that question has come up with some of our other clients.
And who does this apply to? Is it just town council, or is it also the LPA?
I believe the LPA is still subject to a Form 1 because they're more advisory, but this one is the elected officials.
Yeah, it had been at this, I think, I'm not sure if it was at the county level, but I know it was definitely a state level, and now it's all municipalities now have to take part in this.
Very good. Anything else on that? All right, the next item is the agenda management. I'm not sure who put this list together, but I see the first item on here is reorganization of the council. Is that an M&P issue, or is that, I'm not sure why, Amy, do you know why that's on the list?
It's by charter. The first meeting after the second Tuesday in November, we have a reorganization for mayor and vice mayor.
And that's the council meeting.
Gotcha.
And it's a council meeting.
But it's on the agenda
I
management.
think it's just an awareness
It's
thing.
just a heads up kind of a thing? So, okay,
It'll be on the 20th.
that's fine. And then the funding for pool, are these,
We're seeking approval to start the process on design and as well as some other things in the park that we need to keep the momentum going so we can get these things accomplished.
but do you want that on an M&P, I guess, is that?
No, that needs to be on the next agenda, the 20th.
Okay, so this agenda management's not necessarily, I guess, is this normal? Do we have an agenda management for the next council meetings in addition to the M&P? So the lower section is M&P and the upper section is,
No, they go in order by meeting, and then the bottom is kind of just things you've brought up, but we haven't assigned it anywhere yet.
okay,
You said put it on an M&P, but you didn't say where or when.
all right. So,
And, I mean, part of this exercise to me, Jim, is we can go through and probably clean some of this up.
that's fine, let's go through it. So we know that the first item is up at the meeting for November 20th. Funding for the pool, again, council item that will likely be on the calendar for the 20th, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then Gleason change order, I assume that's a council meeting on the 20th?
That is correct. That's the the rec center,
The budget adjustment, is that just a cleanup?
year-end cleanup.
Yep, and then the OSC electric ratification?
What is that?
I believe that's our agreement with FP&L.
What
For
is,
Old
what
San
is,
Carlos?
what is, Old San,
Yes.
Old San Carlos? Yep.
Yes.
Got it? Yep,
Yes.
very good. And that'll be at the council meeting then on the 20th?
That is correct.
Are you saying town-wide, or is that just for Old San Carlos?
It's listed here as Old San Carlos, but it should be townwide.
Right.
Okay.
And then we've got First Florida Integrity Bank loan amendments. I assume that's for the council meeting?
Correct. Yes, sir. That's just extending the bank loan that's on the park, on the Bay Oaks Park.
The $10 million loan?
Correct.
Yep, very good.
I think
Present,
it was 7.5 million was the total loan, or was it 10?
It was 10.
10.
Yeah, we're
Yep. We're down to 7.5.
Okay.
Or lower.
presentation by Scape. Is this another,
That's
similar
a-
to what we had
that'll be on
today?
the next M&P, similar to what.
So
yes,
that's M and
with
P.
fiber and ULI, and this is the third.
Say that again, this will,
You did fiber.
oh,
Couple
fiber.
meetings
I
ago,
used to- I think I hear the word fiber, I think either
Fiber
brand
optics
or I think
or-
fiber optics. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Because
okay.
you're that age.
Presentation of the Corradino group, and that's is that a council or an M&P?
M&P is, as far as I know, it was on here before I got here.
Do we know what that is, Sarah?
It says TC on the date.
Yep, yep.
It seems to me that that should actually be an LPA hearing, and we were hoping to do that in December.
Okay, so can we
so
take-
may
go-
need to-
Can we take that off and add that to the
Okay.
LPA?
I think so.
Well, it's still going to come to us eventually.
Eventually.
That's fine, that's
Yeah.
fine, we can leave it on there. Council strategic planning sessions, so we were going to discuss that conceptually, right? And that would be an M&P?
Correct. We'll probably talk more about it the next M&P and try to make a decision about, you kind of do that right before you get into your budget cycle, and we usually do that March, April.
Okay, very good. joint sessions between council and advisory committees.
And that was something that I think I suggested, because I've seen it in the past, where we get the chairs from the committee or a delegate to come with council and just let us know, the committees let us know what they're doing, and we let them know if there's anything additional.
I think those have been helpful. Do you envision doing that as part of an M&P process, Councilor Veach?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Local church updates, I think we determined that would be an M&P dynamic. We have to shift our format just a bit to accommodate them, which is fine. Downtown district analysis, what you can and can't do. JA, I assume that's not Jim Adderholt. What it is?
No, we know it's not Bill Veach.
Yeah, well, that's true.
But I think that, this can maybe be rephrased a little bit, because with the meeting like we're doing today with the Urban Land Institute and others, that maybe that's what we need, a meeting where we can talk about all these groups and how we want to move forward with them.
Okay, I don't recall that, but I recall us certainly discussing it, but I don't remember bringing that forward, but that's fine.
But wouldn't that be something that would be part of the presentation with the Corandino group, with all the nodes and that type of thing?
That makes sense to me, Karen.
Yeah, and I think that should be something sooner than later. We've got to get moving on where are we going with these different areas and that type of thing. And I don't know exactly, Sarah. Oh, Sarah's not there. Oh, yeah. I don't know exactly how far they are into the process, or if they're ready to present changes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded from the last hearing, the joint session that we had, it sounded as if there was an interest in not doing much in the way of changing future land use districts. So there was a move away from that node concept back towards opening up what was allowed within those districts that already exist. So,
although to be fair, we already have kind of de facto nodes.
yes, you have areas of where commercial development is allowed. It just needs to be opened up to allow additional commercial that's only allowed, like restaurants only allowed in two districts.
So it needs to be refined.
Changed.
Or described.
Yeah. It needs to be slightly modified. But I think that there was a move away from that node concept more back to what we traditionally had in our future land use district map.
Okay, I just want to, because my understanding, Sarah, I don't mean to argue it, but is that we just didn't want to expand the existing commercial areas to make nodes. We want to keep them to a scale that's appropriate for the neighborhoods.
And I thought, I'm not the one making the update to the comprehensive plan. However, what I thought I heard was that there was an interest in not necessarily allowing additional intensity within those nodes, that you liked the intensity that currently exists. And that's what you'd be changing with the future land use changes. So you'd be changing the intensity that was allowed, and that was the intent of those nodes, because commercial use is already allowed within them. So this would have been a change to density and intensity, and I thought we were moving back away from increasing intensity and density.
Okay, now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the current commercial boulevard zoning is very restrictive, and when the town was formed, they just kind of froze whatever was being done there and said that's all you can do.
And that's not intensity or density. That is zoning district.
Oh, okay.
So what we would need to do, we would need to change zoning district regulations that open it up for uses, which, we've all discussed, some additional needs, not saying if you've only ever had an office here, you can only have an office, but allowing, the full range of uses that you would want within your commercial district, restaurants and cafes and maybe bars,
banks and all kinds of different
retail stores.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. I think that's a conversation within the commercial boulevard area that we have, I think is a conversation that we should, in my feeling, we should have to move that forward, to say how we want those to look going forward.
Well, and I just think, I just have this feeling that after the first of the year, we are going to be hit with everybody coming in that have closed on their properties, and they're now cleaning them off and they're ready to go, and we need to have this buttoned up. So I'm just thinking we need to get it on much sooner than later.
I agree.
So I don't know what that is exactly. I don't know if that's December, if it can be done that quickly.
The goal is to have the comp plan hearing with the LPA in December.
Okay.
And then we would have the comp plan hearings in January, the first hearing in January, then we have to transmit to the state, and then we would have our follow-up hearing, I think 60 days later is what we would have to be looking at in order to, I need to check calendars with the state, but I think it's 60 days.
So the LPA then would be December 12th for the first presentation?
I think we changed the LPA meeting to the 19th.
Oh, is it the
was 1
19th?
week later, yeah.
Okay.
Just for timing of a few things going on there.
Okay, and then it would come to us in January?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, so if we want to allow more uses to Commercial Boulevard, that would not be a part of the comprehensive plan change?
That's correct.
So, okay.
Okay, the next item is Resilient Lee Hub. Councilor Veach, I think your name is on that.
Yeah, that's, as the rest of council knows, that's very fluid because we've gone through a few different concepts of how we're going to handle town hall going forward. The Resilient Hub, it was something that was a buzzword for the Resilient Lee meetings as a way to be able to get, take a building and make it into something that would serve what was drastically underserved after Ian on the island, a way to help our people and have robust communications and a place to meet and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's probably we can take it off because I think it's essentially being integrated into the plans we're going to do.
Very good.
It's just a matter of, and I think that, as long as Frankie and Andy have their eye on the funding for that to make sure that we get as much as we can to make that happen. I'm okay with taking that off.
Very good. Amy, we'll just take that one off. Next one is, what is workforce housing? It seems like we've touched on that quite a bit.
Kind of had that, didn't we?
Well, there's so many different levels of it, and I think that if we're going to make this an incentive for people, then it's important how you define it because, at the base level, like getting funding for something, that means that the rent is charged as a percentage of your income, and that is not the only way. I mean, even everything from that the most restrictive to the most open is really essentially just having annual market rate housing. So I think that all that, I think we're throwing around a lot of words that don't necessarily mean the same thing to everybody.
Do you envision having a speaker come in, or what? How do you envision?
I assume, Sarah, that your group can do that, or we need someone outside to tell us, to work on all those terms and understand what they mean.
So I guess we need to understand what it is that you are hoping to do. I know that the town was talking about coordinating potentially with Marcus Goodman regarding affordable housing off island. I have not heard clear direction on how the town wants to attack this. And I think that's the biggest issue is, are we trying to provide it on island? Are we trying to provide it through giving additional density? Are we trying to provide it through some other sort of incentive? Is this something that we want to incorporate into the comprehensive plan? Because we kind of looked at that and options for increasing density if you were going to put it in a 30-year agreement, but that would require the town to create some sort of a housing authority or some sort of organization that was responsible for that. So I haven't heard a clear direction on how the town wants to approach this. We don't have a problem doing it, but we need to understand, we've had a lot of conversations and it always kind of goes different directions. So
And what you what you said, I think, is very much to the point, because there's different values both to the developer and to the town on what they're going to do. Because if it's really affordable for the people who are working here and the waitresses and the bartenders, et cetera, then that's one type of housing. But someone could also argue, do they build a market rate apartment and say, well, yeah, someone who works here could live there. So some, I think, granularity around defining some terms and what they mean for a potential benefit. Because, I know like some people talked about wanting to build essentially workforce housing, but it's for, the H-1B visa people who come in, who they're obligated to house. Other people, just want housing, like the interior designer who has her office downstairs and her living quarters upstairs. I mean, they're all kind of different models. And if we want to have them as an incentive, I think we just need some granularity about, what the terms mean. That was my point. Just really an understanding as opposed to a codifying.
Okay, and so we would probably rely on HUD criteria and their definitions, because that's sort of the baseline. And if we intended to utilize any HUD funding, that's what we would have to abide by. Are you looking for something more than definition, something more to the implementation?
Well, I think, and the idea is really to allow flexibility for a developer without opening the door for them gaming the system. Because, the HUD, going with the HUD affordable workforce housing is basically, it's a loss leader. I mean, you don't make enough, Sanibel doesn't make enough money off of that, even though they own the properties outright, they have to fund it. And so, if we're demanding that someone does that kind of project, then that puts, that's very onerous to them, and it's potentially more valuable to the town. But I just like to know what the different options are, because, someone just saying it's workforce housing because it's annual rentals, I just don't know if that is really being honest.
Well, and how do you attack a problem if you don't define what the problem is?
Yeah.
So what would you like us to do? Because I'm fine providing whatever, either information or code language somewhere, or I'm just not sure where to go with it.
In my mind, just think about the different ways that people can provide housing, either developer or the town, although, the council hasn't seemed to show an interest in the town doing it. And just, then let's get them on a piece of paper, let's talk about what they are, and let's define them.
So one way to do this would be to add it to the public benefit option list. However, that's really only going to impact projects that come in for a CPD or an RPD. But by putting that on the list, you would have the ability to ask them, okay, you're saying you're providing affordable housing. In what way are you attacking this problem? That would give them the flexibility to say, well, we're doing this or we're doing that. And you could decide what scale of value that has to the town, what benefit it's actually providing.
But wouldn't that just be for their own property in most cases, or how does that work?
In some cases, but not always. I mean, think, for instance, of a condominium that wanted to get additional density. They were looking to get additional density and could provide low, medium income housing. And they could find, a way to provide 5 or 6 units that were in that range as defined by HUD. And then the council would have the opportunity to decide if that was a large enough public benefit, providing that additional housing, to allow them to reach a higher level of development.
So, but my biggest issue with the workforce housing is I don't want to see the town get into the management process of workforce housing. So if it would be a condominium that they wanted to give space, they would need to manage that as part of their condominium association. I just don't want to see the town
And I don't
become the renters.
But I've heard exactly the same thing. I don't think that's really any kind of plan with housing. Like Sanibel, they have a separate entity, and then they are in a contract with that entity as a housing provider, and that's how they kind of set the rules. But then the town doesn't manage it. The town, they have a committee, and we have one counselor who is a liaison for that committee, kind of like with our other advisory committees. And but if you have an entity like that, they are involved with the management and making sure that the housing is being used appropriately. So that, it's again, one of these bars that I like to just kind of define it is that if you have a property, if you have units that are on your property, if you're letting someone else manage them and put people in them, that is more difficult for you, but potentially more beneficial to the town. If you want to use it for your people and manage it yourself, that's easier for you, it's better for you. It allows maybe more potential for gaming the system, because it's on private property. It's pretty easy to hide who's staying in a unit on private property. But every plan I know, it's either like a housing authority or a nonprofit like Sanibel has, or a land trust that actually usually owns and manages a property, and we each have a contract with them.
Well, we don't have such an entity, obviously, here on Fort Myers Beach. So Councilor Veach, what is your ask here? I think poor Sarah's being put in a tough spot here.
Well, I think, you listen to the conversation we're having now. There's a lot of ways to slice workforce housing. There's a lot of potential ways. I don't necessarily want to exclude something that's valuable to the town, but I want to make sure that it's not something that can be gamed. So I think I just want to get what are the different types of housing? What do they mean? What's the benefit to the town? What do we want to encourage?
So you want to have an M&P session to have that discussion? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll just keep that on the list then. Sewer inspection with home rebuilds. That's also you, Councilor Veach.
Yeah, this is something I was told that some places are doing after major storms, because a lot of the sewer lines are compromised. I know it was in my house. They removed a dead palm tree and took out 15 feet of sewer line, and so we had it cameraed and repaired. But I think that just something to consider. Is it something we want to have people do, to at least camera out their sewer inspection to make sure that we're not affecting our water quality adversely by having
Do you envision just a conversation amongst ourselves, or are you interested in having somebody from Lee County Sewer come in and present, or what's the ask on that?
Well, I think this is really meant to go between the home and the county. So it's a matter of whether it's something we want to do. And I guess with Nancy too, is it something we can do with what's it, Senate Bill 250? Does that make things too onerous? The fact that we cannot do that?
Well, I was going to mention that if I had the opportunity. Yesterday there was another hurricane-related bill that was enrolled, so it's on its way to the governor. And part of that, a lot of it dealt with Hurricane Idalia and some of the damage that was done in a different part of the state. And then some other provisions that have financial impacts, which I haven't looked at, but I have shared with Andy to see how that impacts our town. However, one of the additional changes was that it changed SB 250 to narrow it to 10 counties because some of the language in SB 250 was kind of ambiguous. They took out specifically any areas impacted by Hurricane Nicole. But the other big policy impact is the fact that the bill is now extending the pause, or some might say the moratorium, to October of 2026. So instead of 2024, it's now going to be 2026, and that legislation itself is going to expire the following year in 2027. So we're looking at that. That just happened yesterday as far as making its way to the governor's office. So, we haven't had time to really analyze it, but it does look like SB 250 is now extended for an additional 2 years.
Since we have Steve here, sorry, Steve put you on the spot there. Is there already some requirement where if someone does a build, they have to inspect their sewer line out to the county?
I think we're going to have to send you to the mic, Steve. Yeah.
You know the routine.
All right, here we go. Steve Poposky, town engineer. During the building process, there's an external inspection of the sewer connections, but there's not a requirement under the building code to use a camera. For example, if someone remodeled, there's not an internal inspection required.
Okay. So it's just an idea that that's something that would be, would help trying to alleviate some of the problems down the road if we have a lot of problems with sewer. I know like Key West, a while ago, they had a problem because of their old, I think they had steel sewer, and a lot of it was leaking, and they were having noticeable high readings around certain parts of the island because of that.
Well, we've got our town engineer. Do you think that's necessary? I mean, do you want to opine on that?
I think in Florida you have less problem, but again, it has to do with the age of the community. I think in the city of Fort Myers, I think you'll have more problems in some of the older neighborhoods where they have older types of material for the sewer system. Typically, the solution is to put in a new PVC pipe. That's usually the fix. You can go in, you can auger the sewer, but a lot of times the tree roots, they will find a way in there if you have large oak trees and things. But in an area with just palm trees and beach and sand, and the trees are not quite as invasive as some of the shade trees. Those roots really spread. It's not to say that it doesn't exist. It just doesn't seem to be as much of an industry here as it is, say, in some other states and areas.
Yeah, and just, I'll kind of yield to you on this, Steve, but, really part of this came out of what happened not long after the storm, where a lot of people were demoing without capping their sewer line. Mm-hmm. And there was obviously a lot of damage because there was a house attached to that sewer line once upon a time. And if it's not a problem, I don't mind taking it off. But if it's something that we're finding that with Hurricane Ian damaged a lot of sewer lines, then maybe it's worth, mandating some kind of inspection.
It hasn't been a hot topic as far as widespread damage to sewer. I'm sure it does happen. It hasn't been something that's come up a lot. But when something gets down in there, for example, a chunk of concrete, that will cause problems.
But just watching the replay last night of the MRF meeting yesterday, I know Dave Nussbaum, the president of Island Winds, talked about how the seawater had gotten into their steel or sewer line, their water pipelines, and it rusted it out, corroded it, and it did require them to change that out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it does happen. That's just, I think you were asking just how important was it? Is it something we need to make a policy for or a new program? I haven't heard anything of particular note about it. It does happen, especially sometimes you have septic tanks and things, and those do require more maintenance.
Well, if on our island, and I don't want to do anything onerous to people to rebuild if it doesn't have a need. So, I mean, if I'm hearing that it's not really, I guess maybe people have a steel sewer, they should look at it. But if the modern PVC's pipes are not a problem, because early on I know it was a big deal, and it was a deal for water pipes leaking and for sewer not being capped.
Well,
but it also sounds like because of the SB 250, we can't add anything like this at the time. And now if it gets extended to 2026, I mean.
Could it be something as simple as, if you have this, you may want to look at addressing it.
Right.
It's always a good policy to check it out. I mean, to have a plumber do a lot of times for $50 or $100, they'll come out with a camera system and record it, and you can see the state of your system.
That'd be great if it was $50 to $100, but I'm not sure if the pricing is really accurate today. I think, maybe just have an advisory that, if someone's got buildings of a certain age, that it's recommended they do an inspection.
If you have any kind of shade trees or even pine trees, they find their way in there. Mm-hmm. Anything with if you have older pipes, if you don't have PVC pipes that are all welded together, that does happen. And also, a lot of times things compound. Normally, the system would work fine, but then maybe there's some roots in there, and normally it works fine, but then something gets introduced into the system that doesn't break down.
Well, I'm okay removing that unless, we can always bring it back if it becomes an emerging issue.
All right, very good.
Just
Thank you.
on,
Oh,
on-
go ahead.
if I may
Yes,
interject
please.
something?
Yeah.
We can put out some information to people and let them know age of the property, if they are building back. Just a little FYI type of thing on our part, not dictating that they have to do something, but it'd be in their best interest maybe to look down that road as they build back.
I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
I'm okay with that.
Correct.
Sounds great.
Yep.
Okay, we'll take that off the list, Amy. And then, the last two on the list is the Veterans Tribute at Bayside Park. We had a nice report on Monday from Barbara Hill, who's working with Frankie and myself, and we're making progress on that. The last item, LDC Comp Plan Transmittal Hearing. I think that came up in our colloquy with Sarah earlier, so I think we can either combine those two or,
That's in December.
yeah,
LPAs.
there you go. And that's all we have. Is there anything anybody wants to add to the agenda management?
Yeah, there's one thing that we keep talking about, and I know that Becky is working on it, is fleshing out that development with deviations piece of our comp plan that was in there. And this came up again because of the pink zones discussion that first came up, and then development with deviations is already in there. Becky's working on it, but I just think we need to get this more in the forefront, maybe along the lines of when the Corradino group comes in and that type of thing, to have that incorporated into that. And I don't know where she is on it, so, and I don't know, Nancy, if you know anything about that?
No, but I will double check with her
Okay.
on it.
Okay,
And, there's another thing that came up too, because there's like numerous paths, and that's a development agreement. It's been mentioned, I think, with things like TPI, and there's one potential developer was talking about it, which I think sounds like it's more of a straightforward thing, where it's basically saying, we want ABC, we'll give you DEF. And just negotiating something like that. I heard that one developer doing that, so it's even, I think, simpler than development order with deviations.
well, the deviation piece was mainly focused on the small mom and pops, not having to go through a CPD and all that kind of thing. So I don't know, and maybe Becky can explain the differences between the two, or what it would be different.
Yeah, I think that I've talked to Becky numerous times about it, trying to get my arms around what the difference is. And it really came out at our joint meeting that, I think there's some small differences, but essentially you get to skip one council meeting, right? Which speeds things up by a couple of weeks and takes, some less time. And
Go ahead.
the one thing I mentioned before, it's not on here, is a discussion of our policies and procedures. And in talking with Nancy, it's only been a couple years since we went over and we made some changes. But Nancy was saying that there's been a couple of changes at other levels that now affect our policies and procedures.
Yeah, so if I may comment, I did read through your policies and procedures. It references Form 1, so at a minimum, we would be changing that to say Form 6. But I don't think our firm has had the opportunity to go through it line by line to see if there's any additional changes. A lot of local governments will revisit their rules and procedures kind of on an annual basis or maybe every 2 years, but the courts are always looking at things. So there might be a couple other little tweaks we'd like to make. So if you'd like to put that on a future agenda, we can have some recommendations for your consideration.
And my motivation for suggesting putting it on before was to make sure that everyone in council understands what's on there, and that we go through it and agree with what the policies and procedures are.
I think that's a great idea, because I think that would have been nice to have in the first month after getting on the council to understand it.
Yeah, it's kind of similar. We talked about, doing a sunshine law class after you have an election, after you have, appointments on committees, that kind of thing.
So why don't we, Town Attorney, why don't we plan on at a next M&P, either you or Becky giving a little presentation on the policies and procedures, and then any potential changes that might be required.
Okay, you got it.
Very good. Anything?
Amy has some things.
Mr.
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, please.
Karen brought up the development orders with deviations. I just need a consensus on that. She's
Yeah.
the only one who agreed.
No, I think that's very important to
I
discussion.
agree with myself all the time.
I concur with that as well.
So that means if you're technically schizophrenic, you could get away with a lot more on council.
Oh my gosh, I have so many visions.
Could we get some clarification of when the development with deviations and development agreement discussion would occur?
I think I don't want to yield to Councilor Woodson, but I believe as soon as Becky's ready.
As soon as she's ready.
Yeah.
So if we could be ready on the 20th, I would love it on the 20th.
Okay.
So just for clarification, Karen, when you say the 20th, you mean at a council meeting, not at an M&P, have that discussion?
Yes.
Okay, very good. That's what we're, just want to make sure we're clear. Very good. Anything else that folks want to add to the agenda management?
And just for clarity on the policies and procedures, if we do that on M&P, we can do that on M&P unless there's changes that have to be made, and then we'd have to do it during a town council meeting, right?
We can. We could do a red line, and then we could discuss it, and then it could come back at a future town council meeting for approval.
All right, I think I'm okay with leaving it up to our council that if they feel the changes are not significant, maybe we can go right to a town council, but if they're significant, we can interject
But
an MP.
I thought there was a desire to have a discussion and kind of a presentation and an overview of the policies. No? I thought that's what
Well, there
John
was,
had said.
but then she also mentioned at least one change we know we have to make.
Right. No.
And if we want to make a change, then we got to vote on it.
Right, but if we have a formal discussion at the M&P and that's a public discussion, then it could just be brought up maybe on the consent agenda, particularly if it's technical revisions. No
All
big
right,
deal.
if that's what your preference is, I'm okay with that.
I think that would work.
I-
All right, very good. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Before I could get my finger